My name is Gloria Robinson, 68 years old, born and raised right here in Louisiana. Folks around here know me as a woman who's worked hard all her life. Through loss, through struggle, through every storm the South could throw my way. But nothing, not even burying my husband too young, prepared me for the moment I opened that envelope. The lawyer's letter shook in my hands, the words cutting sharper than any knife. Petition for custody. Filed by Shantel Robinson, my former daughter-in-law. The same woman who vanished when my son Marcus died in that steel plant accident 16 years ago. The same woman who left my granddaughter, Amara, on my doorstep, with nothing but a blanket and silence. Now, after all these years, when Amara has grown into a brilliant 16-year-old, the kind of girl Google itself is chasing for her groundbreaking work in artificial intelligence, suddenly, Shantel wants to be mama again. Suddenly, she wants to claim the very child she once walked away from. I remember standing in my kitchen that morning, letter trembling, coffee growing cold on the counter, thinking, why now? Why her? And deep down, I already knew the answer. It wasn't love. It wasn't guilt. It was greed dressed up in a mother's smile. Before I take you back to where this all began, let me pause and ask you something. Have you ever had someone walk away from you, only to return when they realized you were worth something? If you have, you'll understand the fire in my story. So stick with me. Leave me a comment if you've ever been underestimated and came back stronger. And if you're listening from Louisiana tonight, hit that follow button, because this isn't just my story. It's ours. A story about family, betrayal, and the truth that can't be buried. It was the spring of 2008 when my whole world cracked wide open. My only son, Marcus Robinson, a strong man of 30, kissed his wife goodbye that morning and headed to his shift at the steel plant outside Baton Rouge. By evening, 2 men in hard hats were standing on my porch, faces heavy with sorrow. A beam had fallen. Marcus never made it out alive. I still remember Shantel, his wife, at the funeral. She cried louder than anyone, wearing black silk gloves and clutching baby Amara like a fragile doll. Folks whispered that grief can either bind people together or tear them apart. For Shantel, it did the tearing. Within 2 months, she was gone. No explanation, no note, just disappeared into the night, leaving her 8-month-old daughter behind. Neighbors told me not to judge her too harshly. They said, Gloria, some people just can't handle pain. Maybe that was true. But pain doesn't excuse abandonment. While she ran from her responsibilities, I was left holding the only piece of Marcus I had left. Amara's tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and right then, I knew my life had a new purpose. At 52, most women I knew were slowing down, planning retirement, enjoying grandkids a few hours at a time. Me? I was starting over. Midnight feedings, hospital visits, bills piled high, and an empty bed where my husband used to sleep. But when that baby looked up at me with Marcus's deep brown eyes, I didn't see a burden. I saw a blessing. That was the turning point. Grief could have drowned me, too, but instead, I chose to fight for Amara. And if you've ever had to start over when life hit you the hardest, you'll understand why I never once regretted saying, "Yes, Lord, I'll take her." The paperwork took weeks. Court filings, social worker visits, background checks. They needed to know if a 52-year-old widow could raise a baby all over again. Some nights I'd lie awake, wondering if the judge would look at me and see only my wrinkles, my modest paycheck from the local clinic, my little shotgun house that creaked in the Louisiana humidity. But when they asked if I was ready to take custody of Amara, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. Clear, steady, certain. It wasn't courage. It was love. The first year nearly broke me. I'd forgotten how endless the nights could feel with a crying infant, how your bones ache when you've worked a 12-hour shift, only to come home to bottles, diapers, and doctor visits. My friends were spoiling grandbabies on weekends, posting pictures from cruise ships and church picnics. Meanwhile, I was living in survival mode, balancing hospital bills, babysitters, and a grief that came in waves so heavy I thought I'd drown. But Amara gave me something Shantel never did. Purpose. She was curious from the start, bright-eyed, always watching. By the time she was a toddler, I knew she was different. She didn't just play with toys, she took them apart to see how they worked. She'd sit with me while I paid bills, asking what each number meant, scribbling her own little codes on scrap paper. Every time doubt whispered that I was too old, too tired, or too broke to raise her right, Amara's laugh pushed that doubt aside. She wasn't a burden. She was Marcus's legacy, God's reminder that love can rise out of loss. So I signed those papers, tucked them into my Bible, and promised my son that his child would never go without love, guidance, or a home. That decision, made in the quiet of a courtroom 16 years ago, set the stage for everything that was to come, for triumphs I could never imagine, and battles I never thought I'd face. Raising Amara wasn't easy, but Lord knows it was worth every sleepless night. I still remember those early years like snapshots, me coming home after a 12-hour night shift at the clinic, kicking off my shoes, and scooping up a giggling toddler who smelled like baby powder and peanut butter. I was running on coffee and prayer most days, but when Amara stretched her little arms toward me, the exhaustion melted away. Money was always tight. My paycheck barely covered the mortgage and groceries, and daycare costs were a mountain I climbed every month. There were days I clipped coupons until my fingers cramped, and nights I skipped dinner, so there'd be more for her. But I swore she would never feel the kind of lack I carried as a child. She would never doubt she was wanted. What struck me early on was how sharp she was. At 4, she wasn't satisfied with picture books. She wanted to know why the sky changed colors, how the washing machine spun, why numbers lined up the way they did. She'd sit at my old desktop computer, pecking away at the keyboard with those little fingers, asking questions even Google didn't have simple answers for back then. By the time she hit middle school, teachers were calling me in for conferences, not because she was in trouble, but because they didn't know how to keep up with her. One science teacher leaned across the desk and whispered, "Ms. Robinson, you've got a genius on your hands." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and thought, Lord, what are you preparing this child for? I wasn't raising Amara to chase trophies or headlines. I just wanted her to grow up steady, kind, and unafraid of the world. But sometimes, destiny has a way of choosing its own path. And for Amara, that path was already pointing towards something far bigger than our little shotgun house in Louisiana. If you've ever looked at a child and thought, they're carrying more light than I ever dreamed possible, then you know exactly how I felt. Exhausted, broke, but proud beyond words, watching brilliance unfold right at my kitchen table. By the time Amara turned 12, Her brilliance was no longer just a family secret. It was something the whole school district was buzzing about. While other kids were memorizing multiplication tables, she was already building little programs on her Chromebook, teaching herself coding from YouTube tutorials. I'd peek into her room and find lines of code scrolling down the screen, her face glowing in the light of the monitor, like she was staring into the future itself. One afternoon, her math teacher called me in. I sat down nervously, worried she might be bored or acting out. Instead, the teacher leaned forward with a smile. "Ms. Robinson, Amara isn't just gifted, she's extraordinary. She's solving problems I've never seen a student her age attempt. Have you thought about advanced placement or mentorship programs?" Sevens. I remember walking home from that meeting with my chest heavy but proud. On the one hand, I worried. How could I afford special programs on my modest salary? On the other, I knew holding her back would be a sin. This child was made for more. So I started making sacrifices. I took extra shifts at the clinic, sold a few heirlooms I'd been holding on to, and funneled every dollar I could into buying her books, software, and online classes. When Amara wanted to join a summer camp for tech prodigies in Houston, I packed our old sedan and drove her 6 hours myself, sleeping in the car while she dazzled instructors inside. By 15, she wasn't just coding. She was creating. That's when she came to me with an idea. A platform using artificial intelligence to help children with learning disabilities. "Grandma," she said, eyes shining, "every kid deserves a fair shot." Sevens. Hearing that, I knew her gift wasn't just about brains. It was about heart. She wasn't chasing money or fame. She wanted to use her mind to lift others up. And deep down, I realized my job wasn't just to protect her. It was to prepare her for the world that was finally starting to notice her light. Because when destiny knocks on your door, you can't just hide behind the curtains. And for Amara, destiny was knocking loud. Amara's 16th birthday didn't look like most kids' parties in Louisiana. No balloons tied to the mailbox, no marching band blasting brass on the street corner. Just me, her, and a small chocolate cake I baked in our kitchen, the kind that sinks a little in the middle, but tastes like love. We were laughing, teasing each other, when she suddenly set her fork down and said, "Grandma, there's something I need to tell you." Sevens. I braced myself. I thought, maybe it was about a boy, maybe about trouble at school. But it was bigger. Much bigger. She took a deep breath. "Remember that project I've been working on? The AI app for kids with learning challenges?" I nodded, proud but cautious. She leaned forward, eyes glowing. "Google reached out. They want me in their mentorship program. They think my design could change the way millions of children learn." Sevens. I nearly dropped my coffee. Google? Calling my baby? In the weeks that followed, our quiet little shotgun house turned into something like a command center. Emails from Silicon Valley poured in. Journalists wanted interviews. A local news crew even showed up on our porch, asking to film the teenage genius from Louisiana. Amara handled it all with a maturity that left me stunned. She'd sit there, explaining algorithms and accessibility, like she was born for the stage, while I hovered nearby, making sure she ate her dinner. But pride wasn't the only thing sitting in my chest. There was worry, too. The more attention Amara received, the more exposed she became. And in the shadows of that spotlight, someone else stirred, someone I hadn't thought about in 16 years. Shantel. It started with whispers. Old neighbors mentioned seeing her name again, this time tied to Google. She'd been working there quietly for years, though never reaching the heights my granddaughter had in a matter of months. And then, out of nowhere, Shantel reappeared, dressed sharp, smiling sweet, calling herself Amara's mother. Sevens. For 16 years, she hadn't sent a card, a call, or a dime of support. But now, with Google's eyes on Amara, she was suddenly eager to be part of the story. That night, watching Amara answer questions for a news crew in our living room, I felt my hands tremble. Destiny had come for her, but so had danger. And deep down, I knew the real battle for Amara's future was only just beginning. The news broke faster than I could process it. One day, Amara's story was tucked inside the education section of our local Louisiana paper, and the next, it was plastered across national headlines. Teen AI prodigy from the South could change the future of learning. Sevens. TV vans parked outside our street. Producers called at all hours. Google flew her out for interviews, promising mentorship and partnerships that sounded like something out of a dream. For most families, that kind of attention would have been pure celebration. But for me, it came with a chill running down my spine. Because whenever success shines too bright, shadows always find their way back. And sure enough, that shadow had a name. Shantel Robinson. It started small. A Facebook post here, a comment there. Shantel gushing about her brilliant daughter, as if she'd been raising Amara all along. Old acquaintances tagged her, congratulating her, and she played the part, smiling behind selfies in corporate offices with captions like, "Proud Mama Moment." Sevens. Then came the phone call. My phone rang one evening while I was fixing supper. On the other end was a lawyer from Baton Rouge, speaking with the kind of polished confidence that makes your skin crawl. "Mrs. Robinson," he began. "My client, Ms. Shantel Robinson, is seeking to re-establish her parental rights and request full custody of her daughter, Amara." Sevens. The fork clattered from my hand. Full custody. After 16 years of silence, I asked him the question burning in my throat. Where was she when Amara was sick with pneumonia at age 3? Where was she at science fairs, birthdays, nights of tears and prayers? Where was she when the girl needed a mother? Sevens. The lawyer, cool as ice, replied, "Ms. Robinson was grieving the loss of her husband, Mr. Marcus Robinson. She needed time to recover, and now she's in a stable position with a successful career at Google. She is ready to provide the kind of home and resources that a 16-year-old with Amara's potential deserves." Sevens. That word, resources, hung in the air like poison. They weren't talking about love. They were talking about money, power, and opportunity. I hung up the phone and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall, where Amara's awards lined up neatly, each one earned with sweat, sacrifice, and nights when it was just the two of us against the world. And now, Shantel wanted to sweep in and claim it all, as if motherhood were a title you could dust off and reclaim when it became convenient. The irony cut deep. For years, Shantel had been part of Google, climbing her corporate ladder, pretending Amara didn't exist. And now that Google itself had spotted the brilliance of the very child she abandoned, she wanted back in. smiling like a savior, when really, she was nothing more than a storm on the horizon. I knew right then this wasn't just about courtrooms or lawyers. This was about truth. About fighting for the bond that no paycheck, no promotion, no press headline could ever buy. Because Amara wasn't Shantel's comeback story. She was my granddaughter, my child, my promise. And no one, least of all Shantel, was going to take that away from me without a fight. The first time I saw Shantel again after all those years, it was like seeing a ghost dressed in silk. She showed up at one of Amara's speaking events, strutting into the auditorium in a tailored suit and high heels that clicked like gunfire on the linoleum floor. Folks turned their heads, whispering. I could feel my jaw tighten, but I stayed still, watching as she glided toward Amara with that practiced smile. "Baby, it's Mama," she said, arms wide open as if 16 years of absence could be erased with one hug. Amara froze. She'd seen pictures of Shantel, sure, but she had no living memory of her. The crowd leaned in, hungry for drama. I stood up before the moment could spin out of control. "That's enough. Shantel," I said, my voice cutting sharper than I intended. Later that week, she came knocking on my door with her lawyer in tow. She didn't come alone. No. People like Shantel never do. The lawyer did most of the talking, laying out her case like it was a business proposal. "Ms. Robinson is not only Amara's biological mother," he said smoothly, "but she also has the professional experience and financial stability to provide Amara with opportunities that far exceed what she currently has." Sevens. I wanted to laugh, but the fury in my chest kept me still. Opportunities. That word again. They talked about Amara like she was an investment portfolio, like her genius was a stock to be managed, bought, and sold. Shantel chimed in, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Gloria, you've done what you could. But you're almost 70 now. Don't you think Amara deserves more than what a tired old woman can give her? She deserves the world, and I can give it to her." Sevens. Those words nearly broke me, but I refused to let her see it. I had spent 16 years proving her wrong, through scraped knees, report cards, broken laptops, and science fairs. Amara didn't need the world. She needed love, stability, and someone who showed up when life got hard. And Shantel had failed that test long ago. But what chilled me most wasn't her words. It was her timing. Shantel hadn't come back when Amara was sick, or lonely, or struggling. She came back when Amara was on the rise, when Google put her on a stage, when headlines shouted her name. That wasn't motherhood. That was opportunism. As I shut the door on them that evening, the lawyer's briefcase gleaming under the porch light, I realized this fight was bigger than I'd thought. Shantel wasn't just reclaiming her title as mother. She was rewriting history, painting herself as the woman who had simply needed time to heal, while I was framed as the obstacle in Amara's future. It was a dangerous lie, and unless I stopped her, people might just believe it. The courthouse in Baton Rouge smelled of polished wood and old paper, the kind of place where history clung to the air. I sat at one table with my attorney, clutching a binder filled with 16 years of proof. Medical records, school awards, photographs of birthday cakes with uneven frosting, all the moments that built a childhood. Across from us sat Shantel, radiant in a navy blazer, flanked by her high-priced lawyer, who probably charged more per hour than I made in a week at the clinic. When the judge entered, we all rose. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder. This was it. Her lawyer went first, painting Shantel as a grieving widow who had simply needed time to recover after Marcus's death. "Your Honor," he said, his voice smooth as glass, "my client made the most selfless choice she could at the time, leaving Amara in the capable care of her grandmother while she worked through unimaginable grief. Today, she returns not as the broken young widow she once was, but as a successful professional with the stability, resources, and love to provide Amara with the future she deserves." "Sevens." He gestured toward Shantel, who dabbed a tear delicately with a silk handkerchief. The performance was flawless. Then it was my lawyer's turn. She rose slowly, letting the silence stretch before speaking. "Your Honor, we respect the hardships Ms. Shantel may have endured, but hardship does not excuse abandonment. For 16 years, Amara's grandmother has been her only parent, through sickness, through school, through the daily grind of raising a child. Not one phone call, not one letter, not one dime of support." "Sevens." I watched the judge flip through the binder we'd prepared. Photos of Amara's first science fair, her middle school robotics team, the article from the local paper about her AI project, and then records of every hospital visit, every prescription, every emergency contact form where my name was written in the space that should have held Mother. "Sevens." Shantel shifted uncomfortably, but her lawyer was quick to strike back. He reminded the court of my age, my modest income, and my limited ability to keep up with a teenager whose future now involved global tech companies. "This is not about love," he insisted. "This is about what's best for the child. And what's best for a child with Amara's potential is access to the kind of resources only her mother can provide." "Sevens." That word again. Resources. It burned in my chest. But my lawyer wasn't finished. She leaned on the podium, eyes locked on the judge. "Your Honor, love and presence matter more than dollars. Ms. Shantel wants to step back in now, at the very moment her daughter is valuable to the world. But a true parent doesn't return only when the cameras show up. A true parent stays. Through the hard nights, the empty bank accounts, the flu seasons and broken hearts, Gloria Robinson has stayed." "Sevens." The courtroom fell silent. In that stillness, I realized something. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a fight over the story of Amara's life. Who had really been there, and who was just arriving now that the spotlight was bright enough. And I knew then, no matter how polished their arguments, the truth was still on my side. The first official custody hearing felt less like a search for truth and more like a theater production, every player rehearsed, every line sharpened. The courtroom buzzed with a strange energy, reporters scribbling in the back row, curious neighbors craning their necks. It wasn't just a family matter anymore. Amara's name had grown too big, her story too compelling. Everyone wanted to see who would win the fight. The grandmother who raised her, or the mother who had come back from the dead, so to speak. Shantel entered that morning like a celebrity, walking onto a red carpet. Her navy suit was perfectly tailored, her hair pulled back sleek and polished, her heels clicking a steady rhythm against the marble floor. She carried herself with confidence, as if she'd already claimed victory before a single word had been spoken. And right behind her, her lawyer, all briefcase and bravado, whispered last-minute strategies into her ear. I sat at my table in my Sunday best, a floral dress and a cardigan worn thin at the elbows. I didn't have the polish of Shantel or the shine of her legal team, but I had something she didn't. Years of memories, proof of sacrifice, and the love that stitched it all together. My attorney reminded me to breathe, but it was hard to steady my nerves when the stakes felt higher than anything I'd faced before. The judge opened proceedings, and Shantel's lawyer wasted no time. He painted her as a woman of resilience, a single mother who had risen from tragedy. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "when Marcus Robinson died in that plant accident, Miss Shantel was shattered. In her grief, she stepped away, knowing that her daughter would be safe with her grandmother. But she never stopped caring. She worked tirelessly to rebuild her life, and today, she stands as a successful professional at Google, ready to provide Amara with a future filled with opportunity." He leaned on that word opportunity again, spinning it like gold thread. He talked about scholarships, internships, resources. He made my granddaughter sound less like a child and more like an asset waiting to be developed. When my lawyer rose, her tone was quieter, but cut sharper. "Your Honor, what my colleague calls a choice, I call abandonment. Ms. Gloria Robinson has been Amara's mother in every way that matters for 16 years. Through late nights at the hospital, through school projects, through the daily bread and butter grind of raising a child. Ms. Shantel Robinson didn't just step away temporarily, she vanished. And now that her daughter's success has attracted national attention, she suddenly reappears." "Sevens." The judge asked for evidence, and my lawyer laid it out piece by piece. Report cards, medical records, letters from teachers who praised Amara's character as much as her brilliance. I watched the judge flip through those pages, my heart pounding with each turn. Shantel sat still, her hands folded in her lap, her expression carefully crafted into sorrow. But every now and then, I saw her eyes flick toward Amara, measuring, calculating, as though my granddaughter were not a girl, but a prize. When the hearing adjourned for the day, the judge announced that Amara herself would be asked to speak at the next session. My chest tightened. I had fought for years to shield her from the pain of Shantel's absence, and now she would have to face it head-on. Walking out of that courtroom, reporters shouting questions, flashbulbs popping, I held Amara's hand tighter than ever. She looked up at me with steady eyes, more mature than her years, and whispered, "Grandma, don't worry. I know who's really been here for me." Sevens. Her words steadied me, but I couldn't ignore the truth. Shantel had money, power, and a carefully spun story. I had love and history. The question was, which one would the court value more? And as I closed my car door and drove us home, I prayed that in a world obsessed with opportunity and wealth, the judge would still recognize the power of loyalty, presence, and the kind of love that never walks away. The second hearing felt heavier, like the air itself carried the weight of everything unsaid between us. I'd spent the week gathering more records, more proof that I had been there every step of Amara's life. School transcripts, photographs, statements from neighbors and teachers who had seen me raising her day in and day out. My attorney stacked the papers neatly, but she warned me, "Gloria, this case isn't just about documents. They're going to try to turn it into a question of who can provide more for Amara's future. Sevens. And she was right. Shantel's team opened with a slideshow of sorts. Pictures of her home in a gated community, her income statements, photos of her and her colleagues at Google, all meant to show she lived in a world of opportunity. The lawyer spoke of college readiness, networking connections, a pipeline to Silicon Valley. He described Amara as if she were already an employee waiting to be recruited, not a 16-year-old girl who still needed guidance and stability. Then Shantel took the stand. She was poised, her voice soft, her eyes glistening with carefully rehearsed tears. I left because I was broken, she told the court. Marcus's death shattered me. I didn't know how to be a mother while drowning in grief. But I've spent these years healing, building, preparing myself. Now I'm ready to give my daughter the kind of life Marcus would have wanted for her. Sevens. Some people in the courtroom nodded, as if they believed her. I clenched my fists under the table. She made it sound noble, as if abandoning a baby was some kind of courageous act of self-care. When it was our turn, my lawyer stood tall and steady. She presented the binder of records, one page after another, proof of every doctor visit, every school award, every moment of sickness and celebration. She asked me to testify. My voice shook, but I spoke the truth. Your Honor, when Amara was burning with fever at age 3, it was me rocking her through the night. When she won her first science fair at 12, it was me cheering in the bleachers. When she cried over her first heartbreak, it was my lap she curled into. Shantel wasn't there. Not once. And no child should be treated like a light switch, turned on when it's convenient, turned off when it's hard. Sevens. For a moment, the room went still. But Shantel's lawyer wasn't about to let it rest. He leaned into the financial disparity. Ms. Robinson, can you honestly say you can keep up with the demands of raising a tech prodigy whose future involves international opportunities? You're nearly 70. Can you support her ambitions the way her mother can? Sevens. I looked straight at him. I may not have millions in the bank, but I have given her something money can't buy. Consistency, sacrifice, love that never quits. You can't put a price tag on showing up. And that's something Shantel has never done. Sevens. The judge listened, pen scratching across the page, her expression unreadable. By the end of the day, she ordered that Amara begin supervised visits with Shantel over the next month. My heart sank, but I held my granddaughter's hand and whispered, "We'll get through this together." Sevens. Driving home, Amara was quiet, staring out the window. Finally, she said softly, "Grandma, I'm not confused about who raised me. But maybe I need to see for myself who she really is." Sevens. Her words cut deep, but I knew she was right. This wasn't just about court rulings. It was about Amara's heart. And if she needed to face Shantel to understand the difference between a title and true motherhood, then so be it. Still, as I pulled into our driveway, a knot tightened in my chest. Because sometimes the truth isn't enough. Sometimes the performance of a lie can be just as powerful. And Shantel was playing her role to perfection. The visits began the following Saturday at a family center in downtown Baton Rouge. The building was plain brick with buzzing fluorescent lights, but to me, it felt like a battlefield. A court-appointed social worker, Ms. Daniels, sat nearby with her clipboard, her pen scratching every move. I wasn't allowed in the room, only close enough to watch through a pane of glass. My chest ached as I saw Amara walk in, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes sharp and cautious. Shantel was already waiting, dressed like she was attending a business meeting. Heels, blazer, hair pulled tight. She rose with a smile too wide, arms open like she was greeting a daughter she'd just tucked into bed the night before. Amara didn't rush into her arms. She stood still, measured. That girl had inherited not just her daddy's brain, but his intuition too. From my side of the glass, I saw Shantel lean forward, talking animatedly. She pulled out photos of Marcus, told stories of the early days of their marriage, their first apartment, the night he proposed. I watched Amara's face soften with curiosity. She'd never heard many of these stories before, and I could see how hungry she was to fill in the blanks about the father she never got to know. My stomach twisted. Shantel knew exactly which buttons to press. Later, Amara told me Shantel had promised to take her to visit Marcus's old haunts, his college campus, the park where he used to play ball, even the little diner where they'd had their first date. "Grandma, she knows things about Dad you don't," she said quietly that night. The words stung, not because they weren't true, but because they came from the very place I couldn't compete with. Week after week, the visits stretched longer. The social worker reported that Amara seemed engaged and comfortable with her mother. Shantel leaned into her role, bringing little gifts, talking about college, hinting at the world of privilege she could open for her daughter. She spoke about private tutors, summer programs in California, and connections at Google that could fast-track Amara's career. I could see the cracks forming. One evening at dinner, Amara put down her fork and asked, "Grandma, what happens when you retire? How will we afford MIT? Or grad school if I want it?" Her tone wasn't unkind, but it carried Shantel's fingerprints all over it. I wanted to cry. For 16 years, I had made ends meet with sacrifice and prayer, and suddenly, that wasn't enough anymore. I answered carefully, "Baby, I've been saving since the day you came into my arms. Maybe it's not millions, but it's steady. And I've always believed in you, more than in any $sign. Sevens." She nodded, but I saw the storm behind her eyes. The hardest blow came when she packed a small overnight bag one Saturday. The court had approved a supervised overnight visit, and Amara seemed almost eager. As she hugged me goodbye, she whispered, "Don't worry, Grandma. I'll be fine." But as I watched her walk out the door, a chill spread through me, because this wasn't just about overnight visits anymore. Shantel was weaving a narrative, pulling at Amara's curiosity, her ambitions, her longing for pieces of Marcus she never had. And if I wasn't careful, she might just succeed in rewriting herself as the mother she never was. That night, I sat alone in our quiet house, staring at the empty chair where Amara usually did her homework. For the first time, I felt the fear settle deep in my bones. Not just that I might lose in court, but that I might lose the very bond I had spent 16 years building. And losing that would break me more than any gavel ever could. By the time the 3rd month of hearings rolled around, the weight of it all was pressing down on me like a cinder block on my chest. Every trip to the courthouse, every new report from the social worker, every polite smile from Shantel. It was all part of a carefully orchestrated performance. And I could see the effect it was having on Amara. She wasn't blind to the truth, but she was curious. Shantel knew exactly how to feed that curiosity. During one of their supervised visits, Amara came home buzzing, telling me about how Shantel had shown her the Google campus through a video call with colleagues. "Grandma, she says I could intern there next summer. Can you imagine?"
Sevens. I forced a smile, but inside, my heart cracked a little. It wasn't just about Google or the future. It was about loyalty, about rewriting 16 years of sacrifice into something that looked small compared to Shantel's shiny promises.
And the more Amara leaned into those promises, the more I feared I was losing her. Not just to the court system, but to a version of her mother who had learned how to play the part convincingly. Then came the twist I never saw coming.
My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Coleman, called me late one night. "Gloria, I need you to hear this before you step foot in court again. We've been digging into Shantel's past. There's more than grief behind her absence. There's a pattern." Sevens. She went on to explain that Shantel had been married again after Marcus's death, something I hadn't even known. Married and divorced within 3 years. She had another child, a son, who was now living with his father because Shantel had failed to provide stable care. Records showed a history of gambling debts, eviction notices, even a stint in court-ordered counseling for compulsive spending.
I sat in silence, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Another child. How could she stand in court, tears in her eyes, pretending she'd learned from her mistakes, when she had abandoned not one, but 2 children? Mrs. Coleman's voice was calm but firm. "This is our leverage. Gloria, the court needs to know that Shantel isn't a mother returning from grief. She's a woman with a history of running from responsibility." Sevens. The next morning, I watched Amara at the breakfast table, her notebook filled with equations I couldn't begin to understand. She looked so much like Marcus when she furrowed her brow in concentration. And I realized then, this fight wasn't just about keeping custody. It was about showing my granddaughter the truth. Showing her that love is proven in the staying, not the leaving. I poured her a glass of orange juice and set it down gently. "Baby," I said, "when you go into that courtroom, remember this. Anyone can make promises. Anyone can wear nice clothes and talk about money. But what matters is who's been there. Who held your hand when you were sick? Who showed up when no one else did?" Sevens. She looked up at me with those steady brown eyes and nodded slowly. "I know, Grandma, but I need to hear it from her too. I need to see if she'll tell me the truth." Sevens. That was the moment I understood. The court might decide custody on paper, but Amara would decide where her heart belonged. And to do that, she had to face her mother, lies and all. And I had to trust that 16 years of love would be louder than Shantel's sudden promises. The Saturday before the next hearing, Amara asked me to drive her to Shantel's house. Alone this time, without the social worker, without the watchful eyes of the court. My first instinct was to say no. Every part of me wanted to protect her, shield her from disappointment. But the look in her eyes was steady, grown up in a way that broke my heart. "Grandma," she said, "I need to hear the truth from her, not from lawyers, not from court papers, from her." Sevens. So I drove her to that polished 2-story home in the suburbs of Baton Rouge, my hands clenching the steering wheel tighter with each mile. The house looked like something out of a magazine. White shutters, manicured lawn,
a shiny SUV parked in the driveway. But all I could think about was the hollow inside, the façade I knew Shantel had built brick by brick on top of old lies.
I waited in the car while Amara walked up the steps, her back straight, her braids swinging down her shoulders. She rang the bell, and Shantel opened the door with that same movie star smile she had worn in court. They disappeared inside, leaving me with nothing but the sound of cicadas buzzing in the Louisiana heat. An hour crawled by. I must have checked the clock 100 times, my stomach twisted into knots. Finally, the door opened. Amara stepped out, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes, those eyes carried a new kind of clarity. She slid into the passenger seat, silent for a long moment. I didn't push her. I just waited, the way I had always done when she needed space to think. Finally, she spoke. She didn't deny it, Grandma. Sevens. My heart dropped. Didn't deny what, baby? Sevens. That she had another kid, a boy. That she lost custody because she couldn't take care of him. That she gambled, lied, and kept chasing money, while her own son lived without her. Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. I asked her why she came back for me. And you know what she said? She said it didn't matter why. What mattered was that she was here now. Sevens. I gripped the steering wheel, fury rising in my chest. That was Shantel, always dodging accountability, always dressing up her failures in fancy words. Amara wiped her face with the sleeve of her hoodie. She kept talking about opportunities, Grandma, about Google, about money, about what she could give me. But she never once asked me what I wanted. Not once. Sevens. I reached over and squeezed her hand. That's because she doesn't know you, baby. She doesn't know the girl who stays up until 2 a.m., chasing an idea. She doesn't know the girl who uses her gift to help other kids instead of chasing fame. But I do. I've known every bit of you since the day your daddy put you in my arms. Sevens. Amara's chin trembled, but her voice was firm. I'm not going to let her buy me, Grandma. I'm not for sale. Sevens. Tears blurred my vision as I pulled out of that driveway. For the first time since the fight began, I felt hope rise inside me like a hymn. Shantel had played her best cards: money, status, empty promises. But Amara had seen through them. And as we drove home under the heavy Louisiana sky, I realized my granddaughter was no longer just a child I had raised. She was a young woman, making her own choice. And that choice, I prayed, would be the final truth the judge could not ignore. The final week before court felt like walking a tightrope in a storm. The house was too quiet, too heavy, like it was holding its breath. Amara spent long evenings at the kitchen table, her laptop open, but her eyes far away. I could tell she wasn't just coding. She was wrestling with the weight of a decision no teenager should ever have to make. One night, I sat across from her with a cup of tea, the lamp casting a soft glow over her tired face. Baby, I said gently, you don't have to carry all this alone. Whatever happens in that courtroom, I'll still be right here. Sevens. She looked up, eyes shining with tears. She tried to blink away. Grandma, it's not just about court. It's about me choosing who I am. Shantel talks like I'm some project she can polish up and present to the world. But you've seen me when I'm messy, when I'm scared, when I've failed. And you never turned away.
Sevens. My throat tightened. 16 years of sacrifice, of prayers whispered over her sleeping form, of standing between her and the world. It all led to this moment. And hearing her say that, I knew she already understood what Shantel never could. Still, doubt lingered. What if the judge doesn't see it that way? I asked softly.
Amara shook her head. Then, I'll make them see. I'll tell the truth myself. I'm old enough to speak, and I'm not afraid anymore. Sevens. The next morning, my lawyer came by with new evidence. Emails tying Shantel's sudden return to Google's interest in Amara's app. Notes from her ex-husband's custody battle over her son. Documents that painted a pattern of neglect. My lawyer spread the papers across the dining table, tapping her pen like a metronome. Gloria, this is it. This isn't just about abandonment anymore. This shows she never changed. She just waited for her chance. Sevens. Amara leaned over the papers, reading every line. Her face hardened. So she didn't just leave me. She left him, too. And now she thinks she can come back, because I'm valuable. Sevens. I wanted to protect her from the ugliness of it, but maybe she needed to see it raw, unpolished. Maybe this was the clarity she'd been searching for. That Friday night, as we prepared for court, Amara came into my room. She was dressed simply, jeans, a plain blouse, but there was a strength in her that made her look older, more certain. She sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand. Grandma, tomorrow I'm going to tell the judge the truth. Not just about you raising me, but about who Shantel really is. I'm not afraid to say it anymore. She's not my mother. You are. Sevens. The tears came before I could stop them. I pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, that same mix of shampoo and determination I'd known since she was a little girl. Baby, I whispered, whatever happens, you've already made me proud. You've already won. Sevens. As we turned off the lights that night, Baton Rouge felt quieter than usual. The cicadas hummed outside, the street lamps flickered, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, praying one last prayer. Not for victory in court, but for truth to be louder than lies. Because the next morning, my granddaughter wasn't just going to court. She was going to stand in front of the world and claim her voice. And I knew then, the fight wasn't mine anymore. It was hers. The final hearing in Baton Rouge felt like the whole world was holding its breath. The courtroom was packed. Reporters scribbling notes, neighbors whispering, even strangers curious about the story of a teen prodigy and the family fight behind her success. Shantel sat poised at her table, polished and confident, as if she were already certain the judge would hand Amara over. Her lawyer repeated the same refrain we'd heard for months. Opportunity, resources, stability. It sounded more like a sales pitch than a plea for custody. When it was my lawyer's turn, she didn't raise her voice. She simply spoke the truth. 16 years of love, consistency, and presence. She laid out every piece of evidence. School records, medical bills, testimonies from teachers, proof that motherhood isn't about stepping in when the cameras turn on, but about staying when nobody else does. Then Judge Ellis turned to Amara. "Miss Robinson," she said gently, "you are old enough to have your voice heard. Where do you feel at home?" Sevens.
The room went still. Amara stood, her voice steady and clear. With my grandmother. She's been my mother my whole life. My mom left me, and she left my half-brother too. She came back when I was valuable, not when I needed her. That's not love. My home is with my grandma. Sevens. I gripped her hand when she sat down, tears welling in my eyes. In that moment, I knew, whatever the court decided, Amara had already spoken the truth. And the truth was stronger than any lie Shantel could ever tell. When the judge returned with her ruling that afternoon, the room seemed to hold its breath. Shantel sat straight-backed, her lawyer whispering in her ear, with the confidence of a man expecting victory. I held Amara's hand, my palms damp, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself breathe. Judge Ellis's voice was calm, but each word carried weight. After reviewing the evidence, hearing testimony from both parties, and considering Amara Robinson's wishes, this court rules in favor of the respondent, Ms. Gloria Robinson. Permanent custody will remain with the grandmother. Furthermore, given the evidence of past neglect, the court denies Ms. Shantel Robinson's petition for custody. Sevens. The gavel struck, and I felt the air rush out of me. Relief flooded my chest so fast I almost wept right there on the bench. Amara squeezed my hand, her eyes brimming with tears but steady, proud. Shantel's face cracked for the first time. She wasn't the polished professional in that moment. She was a woman exposed, her mask slipping as the truth finally caught up with her. She stood quickly, whispering sharply to her lawyer, then stormed out of the courtroom, without so much as a glance back at the daughter she claimed to love. Reporters swarmed as we left the courthouse, shouting questions, snapping pictures. But none of it mattered. What mattered was the warmth of Amara's hand in mine, the weight of the judge's words still echoing in my ears. Permanent custody will remain with the grandmother. Sevens. Outside, under the Louisiana sun, Amara turned to me and whispered, "Grandma, we did it. We really did it." Sevens. And I knew then, it wasn't just a legal victory. It was the sealing of something far deeper. Proof that love, shown every single day, will always outlast the kind of promises that only show up when the cameras do. As the weeks passed, I found myself breathing easier. The grief of the fight was still there, yes, but it no longer crushed me. It walked beside me, reminding me of the love that had carried us through. Shantel's schemes had collapsed under the weight of truth, and Amara, she walked forward stronger than ever, no longer shadowed by doubt. Looking back, I realized something powerful. Justice doesn't always roar from the gavel of a judge. Sometimes it comes quietly, when lies fall apart, and when the truth finally stands tall. Shantel thought she could rewrite the story with money, with status, with polished speeches. But what she didn't understand was simple. Real motherhood isn't proven in promises, it's proven in presence. Marcus didn't just leave me a granddaughter. He left me a reason to fight, a reminder that love is not about convenience, but commitment. And Amara herself became living proof that loyalty, sacrifice, and consistency will always outshine greed. Here's the lesson I want to leave with you. Sometimes the greatest victories don't come from revenge or winning battles in court. They come from knowing you stayed true, that you showed up when it mattered most, and that the people who matter know the truth. So let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or treated like you didn't matter? only to rise stronger because of it. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that truth always finds its way, don't just scroll on by. Tap that like button, drop a comment with your story, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and share this with someone who needs to hear that love, real love, will always speak louder than lies.
Because in the end, the sweetest justice isn't revenge. It's standing tall, living free, and letting the truth shine brighter than any shadow.